Hello. Hi everyone, we're about to get started, so please grab a drink, a snack, and get seated. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. You can hear me? Yeah, that's great. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Estonian Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would like to welcome you here tonight at the UTS Startups Events Space for our annual networking event for 2026. I trust it will be an interesting and informative evening. Firstly, I would like to commence tonight's event by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. A few brief words on the Chamber's mission and what we do. For those of you who are not aware, our Chamber was founded in 2017. The objectives of our organisation are to encourage trade and investment between Estonia and Australia, as well as to create networking opportunities between Estonian business community and the Australian business community. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event is called Building Bridges, the Future of European Union and Australian Economic Relations. This year marks a pivotal moment for the European-Australian relations following the conclusion of almost a decade of negotiations surrounding the European Union-Australia Free Trade Agreement. There will be three speakers tonight who will explore various aspects of the Free Trade Agreement and how it will be implemented, and with some focus on the challenges and opportunities for Estonian bilateral trade with Australia. Following the presentations, we will hold a panel discussion with the speakers, and after that there will be an opportunity for questions and answers, should you have any. The evening will conclude with an informal networking session with some opportunity to taste some excellent new ciders from Finland, Estonia and Latvia. So please stick around for that. I would like to invite our first speaker, Joanna Poktovska, to the stage, or in this case to the screen. Joanna is dialing in remotely. Joanna has served as Policy Coordinator at the European Commission's Directorate General for Trade and she is responsible for trade relations with Southeast Asia and Australia. She has also coordinated the negotiations for the EU's trade and cooperation agreement with the United Kingdom. Currently, Joanna serves as the head of trade and economic affairs within the delegation of the European Union to Australia, where she plays a pivotal role in strengthening bilateral relations and trade between the EU and Australia. Please welcome Joanna.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. I will take it that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm Joanna Bosztowska. I'm the head of the Trade and Economic section at the delegation of the European Union to Australia. First of all, I would like to thank the Estonian ambassador and the Estonian Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry for this invitation. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to debrief you about the EU-Australia Free Trade Agreement. Indeed, I was very much involved in this process during my 2 years. Now I've been here in Australia for 2 years, but also before working from Brussels on this agreement. So indeed, the negotiations on the free trade agreement were concluded at the end of March, almost 8 weeks ago, during the visit of the Commission President von der Leyen to Australia. And maybe just to set the scene before we actually dive into the agreement, I think it's important to stress other achievements of that visit and of the meeting between the President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Albanese. So the second achievement was also security and defense partnership. This is a very important historic step in our security cooperation. And this goes even beyond security. This is about building shared industrial base, ensuring stability in the Indo-Pacific. And another achievement is Horizon Europe. This is the EU flagship research innovation program, which is now open to Australian participation. There are discussions and negotiations. And of course, this is something that will also allow Australian businesses and researchers to access EU funding and networks, which will be really key for innovation, digital transformation, advanced manufacturing. And these three achievements taken together, so the free trade agreement, security defense partnership, and Horizon Europe, these are really important achievements, and these are not just agreements. I think they are really a proof that the EU-Australia relation moved to a different level, moved to really strategic, long-term, values-based partnership. And I think this is really, this is really historic moment in our bilateral relation, and we should keep that in mind even when we start now, when we look at the free trade agreement. So I'm here indeed to talk about the FTA, free trade agreement. I would like to explain the objectives, why it matters, what is included in the agreement, and also what concrete benefits it will bring to companies. And finally, so what are next steps, what it really means, what will happen in the future. So these negotiations took indeed 8 years, which might seem like a long time. There are other negotiations that take even longer. And this was not always smooth sailing. Sometimes we hit a bumpy road. Of course, this is not relevant anymore. What matters is that the EU and Australia managed to achieve a balanced negotiated outcome, an outcome which will bring concrete and important benefits to both sides. And I would like to stress that actually this agreement is an absolute game changer for our trade and economic relation. This is the most ambitious and the most comprehensive deal that the EU and Australia have ever signed with any trading partner. This is really a very modern legal framework that will manage our relations for decades to come. So in terms of coverage, of course, there are some obvious areas, like it covers trading services, it covers tariffs, trading goods, but it also covers issues like digital trade, technology rules. It covers energy and critical minerals. It covers rules on competition, on sustainability. It covers specific facilitation for small and medium companies. So there is really, as I said, this is really a comprehensive piece of legislation. And when we look at Australia's trade policy, this is the key missing piece. Australia has a very broad network of trade agreements, and this was the only one that was missing. And it matters because Australia grants a lot of preferential treatment via its free trade agreements. So it means that European companies were always put at a competitive disadvantage. And at the disadvantage, absolutely, compared to absolutely every other trading partner, to other companies from Japan, from the UK, from Korea, from China. And I think we need to look at this agreement from that perspective, that it actually allows companies to be treated, to put them on a par with main competitors. Of course, the agreement, everybody knows it has economic rationale, but in this case, there is actually a very important geopolitical rationale, in particular in such turbulent global context as we find ourselves now. Such an agreement sends a very strong signal that we are strengthening ties with a like-minded democracy in the Indo-Pacific region. That both the EU and Australia, we have a joint commitment to open and rules-based international trade. And the agreement will help to create more secure supply chains, create more predictable trading and investment environment. And I mentioned Indo-Pacific, and this is Indo-Pacific is an important region for Europe and obviously for Australia. It will support European diversification agenda in that region. We have, some of you might have heard, we have recently concluded the negotiations with India and Indonesia, and we have also agreements with Korea, Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, and New Zealand, just in this region. So this is our 8th agreement in the Indo-Pacific region. And that trade agreements matter because trade with our preferential partners grows twice as fast as with other partners. And this is, this is something that we have looked at very closely for the last 5 years. If we look at the relation between the EU and Australia, this is already a very strong relation. The EU is the 3rd biggest trading partner. And the 2nd trading partner when we just look at trading services, which is really important for economies like the European and Australian. Our trade last year reached almost 90 billion euros, so almost $150 billion. The EU is 2nd biggest investor in Australia with almost $200 billion invested every year. And with this agreement, we expect that our exports can increase by 1/3. So I know there are lots of Estonian companies in the room. So, for example, if we look at Estonian exports to Australia, this is already now worth 32 million euro per year. We also expect that European investment to Australia can grow up to 87%. The tariffs will be eliminated on 99% of EU exports. So again, looking at Estonia's key exports to Australia, these are products like electrical machinery, equipment, furniture, optical, medical instruments, and this is already now worth 13 million euro. We have calculated that just the tariff savings can bring European exporter a saving of around 1 billion euro per year. So these are really very, these are really very concrete numbers. When we look at agriculture, that was an important topic during the negotiations, important and sensitive on both sides. And I think it's important to stress that this agricultural sensitivities were kept in mind throughout the whole negotiating process. The agreement will give European farmers lots of opportunities to expand and sell their products in Australia, just by eliminating tariffs, for example, on major products such as wines, cheese, pasta. But it will also expand the protection of traditional EU foods and drinks. So this is through so-called, and I'm sure you have heard about it, this protection of geographical indications, a system which in Australia has not existed so far. So that's on the EU side. And of course, my focus is to look at the benefits for European companies, European producers. But of course, in parallel, the EU is also opening its market for imports of Australian agri-food products. And for the most sensitive products, agricultural products, the access to EU market will be managed through very carefully calibrated tariff rate quotas, which will be gradually implemented, but also looking at taking into account various sustainability conditionalities, where we look at things like standards and aligning on production standards on climate, environment, animal welfare. Looking at the industrial sector, of course, important will be the removal of tariffs. But in addition to important sector here is the car sector, which in addition to this import duties, removal of import duties, Australia also has in place system of luxury car tax, which applies to all the cars above certain price thresholds. We agreed with Australia as part of these negotiations that Australia will increase the threshold for electric vehicles to 120,000 Australian dollars. And this will allow almost 75% of EU electric cars exported to Australia exempted from this tax. And of course, it will also benefit consumers at large. Another important benefit is in the area of critical minerals, which, as you all know in the room, I'm pretty sure, are critical for a number of strategic sectors, including net zero, digital industries, and of course the demand for critical minerals will continue to grow. And here Europe, of course, relies very heavily on imports of these materials, and here the agreement really will strengthen the complementarity. On the one hand, facilitate access to these raw materials for Europe and also facilitate investment opportunities in Australia. Of course, this agreement will guarantee that these critical materials are sourced in a sustainable, socially responsible and safe manner, thanks to the sustainability provisions, which actually apply not only to critical minerals, but they apply overall in the agreement. And in particular, these are commitments to the Paris Climate Agreement, labor standards, gender equality, and environment. If we look at investors, the agreement will make sure that European investors get the best treatment that any other foreign investors in Australia had. So again, this comes back a little bit to this level playing field that I explained at the beginning, that European investors will have the same treatment. So for example, something that is known to many people, but not to everyone, that Australia applies an investment screening system, which so far Australia applies much lower thresholds to European investors. Now these thresholds will be much higher, which basically means European investors will have a much easier and much facilitated way of operating in Australia. When we look at government procurement, the European companies also will be able to participate on equal footing with Australian firms in bids for government procurement contracts for goods, services, works. And of course, this applies in Europe for the Australian companies as well. When we look at trading services, there are number of provisions that will facilitate for European companies to provide their services in Australia in important sectors like professional services, business services, maritime transport, financial services. And a part of this provision relates to specifically labor mobility. And this is something I have heard from many European companies as a key barrier in Australia. It relates to the mobility of highly skilled professionals. So, for example, imagine an Estonian company wants to have a subsidiary in Australia, wants to be able to send a manager or certain professionals. They will be able to do it for under certain conditions for a limited period of time. And also that means that this labor mobility procedures will be facilitated. For example, the market needs test will be removed for a number of professions and number of sectors. For companies who will sell products in Australia, there will also be facilitation in terms of conformity assessment, in terms of there are a number of rules, for example, facilitating data flows, prohibition of data localization requirements. There are important rules related to intellectual property rights, which actually which will encourage innovation and make sure that our respective industries stay competitive. What is also important is that the agreement includes a chapter specifically dedicated for small and medium companies. So, of course, what small and medium companies need, they need transparent and easily accessible information, and this is what will be set up or is being set up already now as a result of this agreement, like easy accessible databases, which include import requirements, various information about tariffs, taxes, rules of origin. There will also be specific, facilitated procedures, customs procedures, specific forms that will precisely make life easier of SMEs, small and medium companies. When it comes to the benefits of the agreement, I will have to stop here. The agreement contains, these are a couple of thousands pages of text, so I cannot, go much more in detail. But so what it means now? The agreement was concluded 8 weeks ago, as I said at the beginning. So far, in my all contacts with stakeholders, but of course, the discussion today in the room will be very interesting to see whether this is confirmed. The feedback I'm getting from stakeholders is really positive. And of course, everybody's calling for a fast ratification to make sure that actually companies can start benefiting from these rules. The agreement is not yet in force, and I often get the question, so when it will be? And I think this is a great question, and I can already tell you I do not have answer to that yet, because we are following with our domestic procedures. So both the European Union and Australia has a number of legal steps to follow to complete this ratification. So this is what we are doing now, and I can assure you there is a clear commitment on both sides. I can of course speak for the EU to do this very quickly. What we have done so far, we have published all the communication materials on the European Commission website. All the texts are already published. What is not yet published is all the detailed tariff, all the detailed services schedules. This is quite complex, so we need a bit more time, but this will be also coming very soon. What we have just now recently prepared a few days ago, these are country-specific and member state-specific benefits and information on trade. So what now? What does it mean then for companies concretely? I think this is a good moment and a good opportunity to really reflect and to use this time to be ready for the moment when the agreement enters into force. So, for example, by checking various provisions relevant for for a given sector, for example, for critical minerals or for agriculture or for, I don't know, advanced manufacturing, to identify new opportunities. And I think it's also important for companies to prepare for that by talking to the best people who have the knowledge, who have guidance, who can help. And I think the best people for that actually in the room where you are. These are business representatives, these are chambers, Estonian Australian Chamber, EABC. So this is of course EU side, but also on the Australian side, I know there's Austrade. There are a number of tools. Our Australian colleagues are also preparing for that extensively. And these are people with knowledge, network, and connections. And from my side, I can also ensure you that the EU delegation in Canberra, we're always happy to assist as best as we can in this process. And I do hope that we will be soon actually get to the moment when this agreement is in place and we can start applying it. And I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna, for a very interesting presentation. We understand you can't stay around for the rest of tonight, but you've got some pressing engagements to get onto. But we'd like to thank you again in the normal manner for your input tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I wish you a fantastic evening. And you were, in your introduction, you were talking about some tasting of specific, I don't know, you mentioned cider, you might mention some alcohols from Finland. I think some of these products would be geographical indications. So these are the products that will be protected in Australia. So I wish you a fantastic event and a great tasting. And I'm happy to stay in touch with you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Joanna. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite our second speaker tonight, Jan Reinhold, who is the Estonian ambassador to Australia. Jan is a seasoned diplomat with over 20 years of international experience across Europe and Middle East and Asia. And prior to his appointment to Australia in 2024, he was Estonia's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates and permanent representative to the International Renewable Energy Agency. May I welcome to the floor Jan Reinhold.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening from my side as well. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for so kind introduction, Sulev. I have to say that I'm really passionate about business diplomacy, but I'm not confident about trade diplomacy and trade agreements. And currently, this is definitely will be a challenge for me as well to explain you about this great agreement. But at the same time, if I say you that I have seen this agreement and I went it through these 2,000 pages, this will be a big lie, definitely no. So I have seen the comments first. I have seen and witnessed a process of negotiations in Canberra, mainly thanks to our EU delegation colleagues. But once more, thank you for this invitation. I think that the timing could hardly be better because this year has been, at least last 6 months, have been really the European months here in Australia and vice versa as well. Relations between the European Union and its member states have never been closer or more collaborative with Australia as they stay now, these days. I would like to share my comments regarding the FTA and about the impact to Estonia as well. And much has said by Joanna already. She's excellent Polish diplomat in EU delegation, and definitely we are very like-minded. But I would like maybe to come again back here and say that in many ways, this FTA, this has a strategic importance. This is partnership agreement with some trade chapters, because as Joanna already explained, just recently we concluded three main things: FTA, joint defense and security partnership, which also brings us to business, because defense industry is definitely an essential part of that, and Horizon Europe also, which takes us to business because of scientific innovation, collaboration, and trade in this regard. And much of the focus of the FTA discussion has been on problematic issues, but I think we have to talk more currently about benefits once the negotiations has been already successful. And how to say, the tail of the dog is only there. We have to still negotiate about the technicalities. But I would like to bring also similarities between this trade agreement and EU. EU itself, European Union, in origin has been a trade agreement between the founding countries and member countries. The EU originally emerged as an economic union from which a political union later developed. The same logic applies to FTAs. Above all, they demonstrate both parties' interest in deeper bilateral integration and partnership. Initially, this is formalized through free trade agreement, but naturally it also encourages cooperation in many, many other fields. For EU member states, such agreements can be especially attractive with third countries because they provide access to a market of up to 500 million consumers in Europe. This is not merely a one-to-one agreement, I think. This is effectively 1-to-27 agreement currently, creating a multiplier effect through access to all 27 EU member states. I enjoyed very much the speech during the EU Day reception by Minister Don Farrell, who made this point very clearly in his speech that Australia had previously concluded around 30 different free trade agreements or comprehensive economic partnership agreements, but the EU-Australia FTA would effectively double that reach in practical terms. Currently, Australia might have, till the end of this year, 57 FTAs. If we are talking about the benefit to Estonia, numbers are quite humble. In 2025, Australia was Estonia's 47th largest export partner. The value of goods exported to Australia was 32 million only, while imports from Australia totaled 8.8 million. It means that resulting, we have a trade surplus, which is good. Estonia has many trading partners with trade surplus. Among them are Finland, Sweden, United States, Israel. But at the same time, Estonia also runs trade deficit with several countries in our neighborhood, for example, Poland and Lithuania. And definitely you know why, because we are buying petrol from there. The main export categories to Australia were mentioned already by Johanna: machinery, equipment, furniture, other industrial products, as well as wood and wood products. But I think what is our future in trading with Australia? This is niche-based products. Currently, a key role is played by internationally active digital background groups and different companies. Estonian small-scale producers in the food and beverage industry and the services sector. And I'm really sorry that we don't have Estonian official trade office currently in Australia established, but I would like to say that established yet, because embassy is definitely working with that, and I am working with that to have a trade representative here, either in Sydney or Melbourne, because from my previous postings, from my diplomatic career over 20 years, I have established free trade offices in the from the Central Asia and China to Gulf region, and these people have been always very, very useful, and it has been also reflected in the economic statistics after all. So Estonia doesn't compete with Australia in raw materials or mass production, but rather high value-added technologies, including IT. And that is why I think this is our best niche currently to come here with our IT solutions, not only to Australia, but also to the neighborhood, also to the Pacific Islands, and cybersecurity related products and services. I think some of you also participated in our meeting when Estonian Minister of Foreign Affairs quite recently was here in Estonian House in Sydney, and he pointed out the topic as critical materials. This is also something we would like to collaborate with Australia. Australia is a major producer of aluminium, lithium and manganese, all of which are critical for EU industries, particularly in clean energy and digital technologies. And this agreement definitely will reduce or eliminate tariffs on these materials and strengthen this collaboration in supply chain security as well. About the services liberalization and digital trade chapters of the agreement focus primarily on improving clarity of market access conditions, which is really necessary, especially for smaller states who have not too much practice about making business with Australians. I think, however, that all these conditions are unlikely to have a dramatic impact on Estonia-Australia services trade, which currently remains moderate in scale and predominantly digital in nature. In 2025, Estonia's export of services to Australia amounted approximately to 81 million euros, representing around 0.6% of Estonian total services exports, while imports of services from Australia were approximately 27 million euros or around 0.2%. So there are much to do in this regard. Maybe my very personal comment is that before the FTA was concluded, I would generally not recommend it Australia as a company's first target market in this region, because our understanding and best practices showed that entering to the region via New Zealand was much easier, as it is more straightforward unitary state. Australia consists of 6 states and 2 territories with significant differences between them in both legal frameworks and business culture. It was a bit hardship for Estonian companies. But however, if the FTA is concluded or will be concluded now, I would feel much more confident recommending come to Australia directly. One important element still missing, and this is bilateral double taxation avoidance agreement, which is in our agenda. We're working with that. Again, no promises, but I hope that we can conclude it soon as well. There were many disagreements, definitely, during the negotiations between from European single member states as well. And I think the elephant in the room was France. I'm not disclosing anything which is top secret, definitely, currently, but you can understand that agricultural products and all the dotations which are coming from EU to France, this was the key issue. But the fact that French Minister of Foreign Trade recently visited Australia as the first EU minister to do so demonstrates very strong and broad EU-level support for the FTA. And I think the fact that Finnish Minister of Trade just followed to this visit as well, was it a couple of weeks ago, right? So it seems, it shows also that Nordic Baltic countries are very happy and would like to take all the benefits with this agreement ahead. So just to conclude, from Estonia's perspective, we think that because of FTA, exports are likely to benefit overall. More heavily subsidized sectors may face increased competition because the agreement introduces a greater degree of market-based competition. But however, This is less relevant for Estonia since agricultural exports are not our primary focus in the Australian market. Maybe my friends from Baltic cider would like to say something different, but currently we see that still digital and cybersecurity are the services or goods we would like to sell here to most. EU industrial goods are likely to benefit significantly. This also applies to cooperation on critical raw materials when the MOU was signed also 2 years ago, and Estonia's interest lies in securing raw materials for our industries, for example, for magnet manufacturing and other advanced industrial productions in Estonia. And industry and services exports are both expected to benefit. For Estonia, again, in particular, the agreement is positive because we are especially interested in expanding exports in digital services and other high-value added solutions. In agriculture, Australia believes that the negotiated quotas don't provide sufficient market access, while the EU remains cautious about the excessive food imports. In my view, the outcome represents a reasonable balance in FTA. It means that all is settled. And Estonia and other smaller member states are likely to benefit because the agreement creates more opportunities for niche products to enter to the market, and in digital services, Estonia is clearly positioned to gain. So maybe just to conclude is that we are taking it as a long journey for Estonian businesses here. We are just starting, but all the benefits what FTA can provide for our small and medium-sized businesses are met here, and currently this is the right time to start. So thank you once more for inviting me here, and thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Jan will rejoin us later for our panel discussion, so there will be an opportunity for you to ask any questions later on. I'd like to invite the third speaker, Cara Johnson, who is a director of the European Australian Business Council, EABC, to join us on stage. Cara leads the policy and institutional engagement area at the EABC, and she works closely with government and industry stakeholders in the EU-Australian trade and investment relations space, including the recent free trade agreement. Please welcome Cara to the stage.
Thanks everyone for having me. I think a lot of what I had written down as a policy note has already been covered, but I'll try and keep it briefer than I otherwise would have. So I think many of you know the European Australian Business Council. We're a bilateral business council. We're a member-based organisation, and our members are European and Australian businesses that are operating in both markets. So we quite uniquely sort of advocate for liberalisation and for the settings to be improved in both directions. We've been working on the free trade agreement for about, well, at least advocating for one for about 20 years now. These negotiations have been tricky, but we're just so incredibly grateful for the amount of support that we've had from all of the bilateral chambers here in Australia, but also in Europe, and the incredible working relationship that we've had with the diplomats and the officials working on the agreement. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement represents, I think, as the Ambassador has said, as well as Joanna, a significant step forward in deepening the economic relationship between Europe and Australia. For European business, its value lies not simply in tariff reduction, but in combining improved market access with greater investment certainty, stronger procurement opportunities, enhanced mobility, and reduced behind-the-border regulatory friction in one of the most stable and predictable economies in the Indo-Pacific. Australia is a high-income, rules-based market with strong demand across infrastructure, energy, advanced manufacturing, defence, and services. In a global environment characterized by supply chain disruption and increasing geo-economic fragmentation, the agreement provides European firms with a more secure and predictable operating environment, as well as a strategic platform for engagement across the wider region. I won't go into the specific details. I can in the questions on sort of tariff reduction. However, the more significant gains for European business lie beyond tariffs. It delivers meaningful uplift in investment certainty, which is particularly important for capital-intensive sectors. It provides greater transparency around Australia's foreign investment regime. We've already talked about the FIRB thresholds. These sorts of things reduce transaction risk and lower compliance uncertainty, and they support long-term capital deployment. For many of our members, which are European sort of subsidiaries set up in Australia, they're competing for capital against all of the other subsidiaries set up all around the world with their head office. And having frameworks like this just gives them one more barrier that they don't have to address with head office in terms of why you can invest in Australia, why it's not risky, why it's not going to have an incredible burden attached to it, and it makes them much more able to sort of expand and grow their operations here. Government procurement, which I think was well covered, is another major area of opportunity. And significantly, it's not just on the federal level, it's also federally that the access has been improved dramatically. For European businesses, many of them are incredibly competitive all around the world in procurement markets. They're well positioned to participate and win contracts in areas including transport infrastructure, clean energy systems, digital infrastructure, and public service delivery. Many of European firms are already deeply embedded in the Australian market, but those who haven't already had the experience, this is another thing that breaks down a barrier where they'll actually take the risk on Australia now because it doesn't seem like such a risk. They're not nervous that a US firm or an Asian firm is going to be preferenced over them. Services and mobility provisions are equally important. And as Joanna mentioned, for our European member companies, movement of people, temporary movement of people is one of the biggest barriers for them when they're setting up projects. And it's not about getting their experts into Australia to stay here and sort of replace local workers. It's them bringing their technology here, teaching people how to use it, set it up, and creating incredibly high-value jobs here in Australia. It's benefiting both markets. A key component of this is, of course, the facilitation of the recognition of professional qualifications, which will be a complete game changer, and it's a sort of deal that the EU has not agreed to with any other of its FTA partners. So, for example, going in the other direction, when an Australian professional gets recognised in one member state, then they automatically are recognised in every member state. That's not happened before, and it's an incredibly important opportunity that the EU's provided. Beyond tariffs and mobility, the agreement addresses many of the behind-the-border barriers that are often the most significant constraint on trade and investment. It strengthens regulatory transparency. It promotes cooperation on standards and conformity assessment. It reduces duplication in testing and certification. And it also establishes modern digital trade rules, which are particularly important for the prospective Australia-Estonian relationship. Taken together, the agreement is fundamentally about reducing uncertainty, making Australia a more predictable and efficient place for European firms to operate at scale. Turning to ratification and implementation, we're looking at an 18 to 24-month process. On the Australian side, it's a lot more simple. We spent this week, just before budget briefing JSCOT, which is the committee that will look at the agreement in the Australian Parliament. On the European side, there are a few more hurdles, but we've had incredibly positive feedback from the European Parliament about the level of support for speeding up that process, like was done with the New Zealand agreement. The political context, though, both in Australia and Europe, is going to be critical to successful ratification. We don't live in a world now where you can just rely on the fact that open and free trade are going to be supported by everyone. In Australia, the agreement sits within a trade policy environment that remains broadly supportive of open markets, but where protectionist sentiment has become more visible in recent years. This is particularly evident in certain parts of the political spectrum, including the rise of parties such as One Nation, and indeed in elements within the coalition. While these views don't represent government policy, they do contribute to the domestic political debate and can shape the tone of the parliamentary scrutiny. Concerns around agriculture, particularly red meat, dairy and geographic indications, will continue to be raised, and managing these concerns respectfully will be important to maintaining broad political support through the ratification process. Europe, as I'm sure you all know, is equally complex. Trade agreements are increasingly contested, and the experience of other negotiations provides important context, including what many of you will have seen overnight, which is not directly related to the Mercosur agreement, but the effective banning of many of Brazil's agricultural products into the EU because they don't meet certain standards. Now, that's a different context with Australia, where we have equally high standards, but there are different ways that, because they're completely different countries and have completely different agricultural production techniques, FTAs like this allow for us to move past some of these different settings and to treat each other in an open and predictable way. The context of these matters directly for the Australia-EU FTA, and businesses as well as politicians are closely watching what's happening in the EU, as well as we'll be watching very closely what will be happening in Europe at the beginning of next year with the French presidential election and how that shapes trade policy. Ultimately, securing ratification on both sides is going to depend on three factors. First, maintaining a clear and consistent narrative that positions the agreement as a strategic and economic partnership, not just a trade deal. Second, managing sensitivities in agriculture and other politically exposed sectors without reopening negotiated outcomes. And third, ensuring strong and visible support from the business community, demonstrating the agreement's practical benefits in terms of investments in jobs, capability, and supply chain resilience. In closing, for European business, the FTA is fundamentally about certainty of access to a high-value market, certainty around investment conditions, and certainty in operating within a stable and transparent regulatory framework. In an increasingly uncertain global environment, these foundations are not guaranteed, and it's precisely what makes this agreement both commercially and strategically important. Thank you so much, and look forward to answering any questions that you have on the specifics when we get to the panel.
Thank you, Cara. We will now commence our panel discussion session, and may I invite both Jan and Cara to join us here on the floor, and the moderator will be our Chamber Director, Indrek Pernik. Over to you, Indrek.
Thank you very much. Well, grab a seat. Okay, so we'll be here until, I guess, it's cider time, so try to make it nice and efficient. To start off, I think it makes sense to start off with a question about Estonia and go straight to Jan. And I was quite curious about the 1 to 27, I guess, negotiations that you would have with European Union. Obviously, Estonia is one of the smaller trade partners and smaller economies. Is there a chance that we'll be bullied by all the big boys and don't get the sort of best deal out of it?
Thank you so much, Indrek. Yeah, Estonia is one of the smallest trade partners to Australia from European Union yet. But situation will definitely improve once the FTA is finally concluded and in force, and also our double taxation avoidment is done. Yeah, to be honest, currently what our government is doing, we are preparing for ratification of the agreement in our parliament. And for that, actually we're asking the comments from the entrepreneurial organizations and with different entrepreneurs as well, and so far not too many of them, because Estonians are not used to be active in this market because of geographical location, maybe because the main region for Estonian foreign trade and business has been approximately 1,000 kilometers from Estonia. It means that we are in very convenient mode in this regard. But at the same time, once we are seeing how our diaspora is enlarging here, more people are coming to Australia, and some of them are returning to Estonia as well with the experience from this country. It means that it brings our businesses also closer to each other. So, and what we are currently doing, definitely, we are doing to push our digital and cyber industry here, as it was mentioned many times in my expose as well. But we do not want to limit ourselves only with digitalization and these kind of services. We would like to bring here really the niche products. And that is why we are currently doing, and where I see also the very esteemed Chamber's role. We have to do promotion, better promotion in Estonia about the trade opportunities. We can say that free trade agreement is already there, all the gates and windows and doors are open. Just please come.
Excellent. I'll move on to Kara for. It was quite interesting, some of the words you mentioned, certainty, stability, transparency, supply chain disruptions, things like that. So I wonder, do you think there will be a meaningful sort of change in Australia's trade with its sort of bigger trade partners, and in particular China, for, I guess, reasons that, we have huge trade going on with China, but I guess we don't want to always rely on them. And of course, United States is definitely not the most stable and sort of transparent trade partner at the moment. Do you think this sort of trade will have a meaningful effect on those numbers?
Well, I think that what we're looking at here is an incredible opportunity for firms to be able to diversify. They're no longer, and they understand that they can no longer completely rely on very large trading partners in either direction. And that they have to, when conditions change, for example, tariffs just emerge, or there's economic coercion put on them, that they have to have reliable partners that they are able to diversify their products to. Now, a lot of what Australia produces and sends to China, it's unlikely that they'll send to directly to Europe, for example, in terms of resources and even some sort of rare raw materials. However, when you have a trade agreement with the EU, and the EU also is engaging more with the CPTPP and other partners in the region, and you have these trusted frameworks between all these partners, that means that the EU and Australia can confidently partner with other countries in the region, set up processing, be jointly working with one another on the full value chain, not just Australia sort of shipping raw materials to Europe at a very expensive rate. So I think it's about building those value chains and working together, and we're not 100% sure what that's going to look like, but there are a lot of countries on the way to Europe that we both partner with and can do more together. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll have a question for both of you, and then after that I'll open the floor for, I'm sure there's tons of questions here. But Joanna mentioned that, and of course there's a lot of trade agreements. European Union, I think she even mentioned some of the numbers, which of course I can't find now, but considering India, Indonesia, very recent, how does the Australian and EU trade agreement differ? Is it sort of bulk standard agreement, or are there sort of some interesting points that perhaps both of you would like to bring out?
Please consider this as my very personal view then. I think this agreement, you mentioned values, it's a very good point. This is primarily geopolitical, not as much tariff driven. What is currently happening in Washington? What is happening in the region about geopolitics in general? I think Australia is also in the mood to find new partners. As well, the same about European Union. There was mentioned that yes, that EU-Korea, EU-Vietnam, even a comprehensive economic trade agreement with Canada, Mercosur quite recently, all are very important for EU. But I think that this free trade agreement with Australia will fill this gap, what was needed already for a long time. About the diversification, you mentioned China. I don't know what is the trade balance with China currently. The percentage of foreign trade from Australia to China is 30, no, less, for sure less. But this is about less than 50, I believe. I have seen the statistics lately, but yeah. But I think this FTA with Europe, definitely and other respective countries also, this is a tool how to diversify all these geopolitical threats and all this to minimize all the risks. And who might be the best trade partner for you? The most like-minded countries, right?
Thank you. And maybe just in the actual sort of specifics of the deal, it's incredibly ambitious, as I think I mentioned on the mutual recognition of qualifications. That one is that's just really impressive. That hasn't happened before, and that means your architects, lawyers, engineers can go and work in the other markets. And when we have a sort of global situation where there is a sort of war for talent, pretty much everywhere there is a war for sort of engineers and those really highly skilled professionals, being able to send them to set up projects all around the world and transfer them, that's going to become incredibly important. Also on sustainability provisions, it's incredibly ambitious, as well as the sort of measures around the recognition of Indigenous Australians and their IP on in certain areas. It's a very sort of progressive FDA. Now, there is some sort of misinformation out there about it sort of constraining both partners' ability to make sort of domestic changes to regulation. That's not what the agreement is actually going to do in effect. It's not going to constrain partners' ability to regulate in the national interest and on national security grounds and all of those areas. But it does make sure that we are working on a level playing field for example, when Europe is moving so far ahead in terms of its decarbonisation and the sort of requirements that it's putting on European businesses, it makes sure that exports from Australia and that what Australia is doing may be slightly different and going in a different way, but that's recognised, and that both partners are taking steps and moving forward in a sort of, I don't want to even say it's values aligned, because it's economically these things make sense, but yeah.
And just to add, if I can, so why this agreement should succeed for sure is that we have relatively open economies, both low average tariffs, strong rule of law, major services sectors, and high-income consumers. It makes us similar. So political like-minded, economic like-minded, and last but not least, definitely, there is an Estonian lady who is currently Foreign Minister of European Union. And actually, under her very smart supervision, we are working from Europe side as well with Indo-Pacific countries more and more, and it will be definitely one of the best cornerstones, this FTA and other two agreements we are going to conclude later this year for this topic.
Fantastic. So, question time. And I guess, Jana will bring a microphone to you because the event is recorded. So please do say your question into the microphone. Thank you.
Awesome. Arsha.
Good catch. Thank you for your speech, very insightful. I just had a question with the EU-Australia agreements moving forward. Where do you see the biggest opportunities over the next decade for younger founders and emerging industries, particularly in areas like technology, energy transition, and critical minerals?
For young founders?
Yeah. And engineers.
Sorry, what was
And
that?
engineers, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the exciting things about the agreement is obviously the opening up the procurement. Now, as I think I said before, there are a lot of European companies that are well established and have been in Australia for sort of before federation, but there are others that haven't and offer niche sort of innovations in sort of areas that solve problems that are coming up, whether it be to do with the energy transition and very specific areas. We're having, in Australia, we've got the longest and the skinniest electricity grid, and there are all sorts of issues with connecting renewables to the grid, making sure that we have sort of reliability, those sorts of areas. There are opportunities where larger firms maybe aren't innovating at the same scale as young founders. And in a market like Australia, while it's smaller than some others, there are huge opportunities like that. It's such a huge country. And so the grid is one example where comparatively to smaller countries that have a lot more people, that's an incredible opportunity. But that mobility piece as well, I think being able to get people moving between European countries and Australia. Ambassador?
I mean, green technologies, energy, climate change, all these issues are very relevant for us. Currently, this is my second year of my service here in Australia. I'm trying to pay visits to the official state visits to the different states and territories. And also I'm accredited to 5 Indo-Pacific islands. Everywhere where I starting my conversation about business opportunities, we are starting about the cyber, digital, what are the strongest sides of Estonia, but we're always landing about the climate change and energy. So it means that this is definitely very relevant to the governments and people in this region. What is my dream? My dream is to bring more Estonian startups to the country and to the region. Because currently Europe is not living the best times in terms of startup financing as well and funding. So I think we have many ideas, especially among the young people like you and student companies and so on, just to come here and share the knowledge and find the partners. Definitely all these issues are very relevant to us. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Firstly, let me thank you for your speeches and the panel. It's been very informative. Just got a question, and I know Ambassador just sort of just hit on it. What I noticed with Estonia, it's obviously very small population in terms of the diaspora, but I don't notice any formal links. I know you mentioned the fact that you're going to bring a trade representative out and the idea is to grow that. But do you have any formal links with, say, universities, with CSIRO, with the, I know we're here at the startup, and I know you just mentioned startups, but is that something that's missing at the moment with the trade links between Australia and Estonia? There's no formal links with those sort of centres and centres of excellence?
I think we have to find definitely more incentives to bring Estonians here to build up the partnerships. Let me bring you one, let me tell you one story about last November, when Estonian Minister of Education and Science paid a visit to New Zealand and Melbourne. We had productive visits there and discussions about, especially about the AI in education, which Estonia is trying to to have the new revolution currently after our e-governance and other achievements, what was achieved already 25 years ago. Now the second chapter is coming, I hope. And what was the follow-up? Follow-up was that 5 out of 6 rectors or vice chancellors of our public universities, public comprehensive universities, visited New Zealand for 1 week. This was especially in this February before our National Day, and that is why they were hurried back to Estonia. They didn't reach Australia. But this is my current master plan, is that they are coming to Australia soon as well, I hope early next year. So, and this is I think this is the venue and this is the reason to discuss what we can do about startup sector, what we can do about academic and students exchange and mobility. I would like to see them earlier, because the starting point for Horizon Europe and for the funding is 1st of January. I think if they are coming in February next year again, we are slightly late. We have to come earlier. Because in Estonia, in Europe, and also in Australia, all these sectors related to innovation, higher education, they are hungry to collaborate. And if there is a funding, and this funding for next financial perspective, since 2028, from Europe side, is doubled. It means we have 50% more money than what we used to have. And definitely diaspora and young people here like Jane, you are very important for us, because we would like to also present success stories, what people are doing here and how you can help our people who are entering to the market. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Raul.
Hello. This question is actually from one of the listeners online, and the question is about labour mobility under the New Deal, and apparently the media has reported 4-year visas for EU citizens. So if that's true, and then is there an age limit, and how's that sit with the current working holiday visas, if you know?
Thank you, Raul. This was a very predictable question, definitely. But currently in the stage of this change, what will happen, I'm not in the position to comment it right now, because we haven't seen the final version of this chapter in this agreement. Ask me again in September, in October. Then I'm in the position to comment it. Regarding the working holiday visas, actually currently, as I understand, there is an age cap till 30 years old people, right? And
is it 35? I think maybe 35 now.
30, still 30, I believe. Oh. But I know that there is a request from the audience and people that it should be 35. Yeah, this is definitely in embassy's to-do list. I personally do not see that this is an urgent question to solve it. I think the more urgent for this audience and for those people who are coming with this respective visa is the Medicare. We have to solve first the Medicare issue, because it will ease definitely the life, all these insurances cases actually for all this audience. But then when this is done, let's take the second step and we can discuss about age gap.
Thank you. We might take 2 more questions. Anyone else has any questions to the amazing panel? Well, we might not. Well, thank you to the amazing panel. I'll hand it over to Indrek. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll finish off with just a very quick question, and Karak did mention that a little bit already, but Joanna was quite cagey about it. But I'm just wondering, you know, an average Thomas or Peter in Estonian, when will they start benefiting from that agreement? And is there still a risk that something can go wrong and we're sort of celebrating a bit too early?
I think it's really important to remember that we've got a fight ahead of us to get this ratified and implemented. The early signs are incredibly positive, though. But as I mentioned, there are some sort of political events that will be coming up near the beginning of next year, or first quarter, second quarter next year. But we have had, as the ambassador also mentioned before, for example, the French trade minister come here and explicitly say France is supportive of this FTA that's been concluded. And it's really important that there are sort of those sort of bold and brave supportive statements being made by political leaders, by diplomats, but also businesses need to be feeding that information back to the politicians to explain why it matters for them and why they need to push ahead with this. Really, 18 to 24 months is the time frame, but if we were trying to be ambitious, we could sort of see this happening, by mid-year next year, if we're lucky. And then shortly thereafter, we'd have businesses benefiting. But it's unlikely to happen before then.
Let's cross the fingers for this scenario, definitely. I know that everyone is very keen to ask when is the date, but among European diplomats, this is quite realistic deadline, what you put there. I can just very briefly describe what is the procedural way till the ratification. This is so that actually currently the people are working with technicalities. The text should be adopted by Commission. There should be 27, actually it's usually should be translated to all the languages. Currently we are trying to have a kind of shortcut that English only prevail. It will definitely, we will win couple of months for sure about the technical procedures. Then it needs a ratification in all 27 member states, which, as French was mentioned again, this is not an obstacle, I believe. I'm not going to comment Australian internal policy, definitely. It might be maybe even more issue here because of internal politics and respective debates. I hope, yes, that at the end of this year we have some milestone there, and most probably the discussions in the European Parliament will happen early next year.
And just to say that, so fortunately for this one, because it was just an EU competence one, so that it's just a basically 50-50 yes-no vote in the European Parliament when we get to that stage. So, and there is, from most of the committees, a really sort of positive feedback so far. There are obviously concerns to make sure that Europe's interests are safeguarded, which is incredibly important. But overall, there's a lot of goodwill.
And good thing is that there is no parliamentary debates here in Australia. This is by government decision.
Fantastic. Well, promising times ahead. Well, I'll hand over back to Sulev, who will do the concluding notes and go from there.
Thank you, Indrek, and our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we have heard from three very interesting speakers, Joanna Pokstovska, Jan Reinhold and Kara Johnston. What have we learnt tonight? We have learnt that the FTA marks a very important step in strengthening the economic and geopolitical ties between Australia and Europe. And
I see that honorary consul is speaking, very good.
And that the FTA will create, hopefully, many new opportunities for businesses to increase bilateral trade between Estonia and Australia. So can we express our appreciation again for our speakers' time and thoughts tonight in the usual manner? Thank you. Thank you also for the UTS Startups for allowing us to use this wonderful space tonight. Jane Oya would like to say a few brief words.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Jane. I actually work here at UTS Startups. I run events here every Friday. I have a couple of familiar faces here from the community, Arsha. I won't take up much of your time, but I just wanted to let you know what we're about. There's actually a co-working space 2 floors above us. We have 250 desks. And Arsha is one of the members. So if you want to ask what it's about, please approach him after, and myself as well. But I think there's a misconception that it used to be actually only for UTS alumni and UTS students, but we actually recently opened it up for anyone, and it's only early stage startups. So if you're looking for a home and are sick of working from home, you want some like-minded people to be around you, it's a really affordable co-working space. And one thing that sets us apart from everyone else is we do a give-back system. So if you run events here, you get money off your membership. And that's another thing I want to let you know. If you have any startup-related events, this event space, we actually give for free if you give back to the community. So basically, anything startup-related, please come see me. Get my contact details. We'd love to have more events in this space. But also, I forgot to say, I am also director of the Estonian Chamber, so it's funny how my 2 worlds collide tonight. But thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the speakers, and thank you for giving me a chance to speak, Sulev. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our formal proceedings. But can I briefly invite you to stay for some very interesting cider tasting after the event? And on that note, I would like to invite Asnate Zemele from the Baltic Cider Project to say a few words. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Ambassador, the friends, colleagues. I'm Latvian, but we are sisters and brothers, in Baltics. And we are here for Baltic cider. And we are very proud to say that we are not only would like to, but we do export. So I am very happy to say, with all your support, with all your assurance that we are welcome here, that all that sincere welcoming us last time in October when we were in Estonian House, I would like to inform you that we are with the Baltic cider in Australia, and we came here with the whole container, and here is our contact person, Mark Wood, from House of Drinks. So when you have birthdays, events, receptions, gatherings, so please support us. We very much appreciate, and without your help, we are no one, nothing, nowhere. So thank you very much for supporting us so far, and we hope for your support in the future too. We have a little video of 2 minutes. It's only Estonian producers, and then you are very welcome to taste the cider. We have some samples with us. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Oleme tõsisemalt siidrit tootnud algusest peale sellise põhimõttega, et ainult oma kasvatatud õuntest, et saavutada seda unikaalsust, mida meie mikrokliima, meie loodus annab.
Meil Jaani Hanso siidrivabrikus on kindel veendumus, et Eesti siider Eesti õunast võiks olla maailma parimate hulgas, kui seda õigesti ja kannatlikult ja looduslähedaselt valmistada.
Kodases me keskendume ringmajanduspõhimõttele oma tootmises. Meie eesmärk on kasutada ära kõik osad õunast, mis siidri tootmisest üle jääb, selle me destilleerime siis õunabrändiks.
Tori siidritalu sai alguse aastal 2014 ja muidugi, mis teeb sellest siidrist ikkagi päris siidri, et oluline on teada, missuguseid sorte kasvatada.
meie eesmärk tulevikus on kasvatada meie joogitootmist ja arendada ja laiendada ka meie väärindamistehnoloogiaid ja siis selle kõigega vallutada laia maailmat.
See siidri valmistamine ja kogu see protsess on selline elukestev õppimine, et targemaks saab siin iga aastaga.
Ekspordime üle poole oma toodangust üle maailma erinevatesse kohtadesse ja otsime väsimatult uusi siidrisõpru uutest kohtadest, uutest riikidest. Eesti siider väärib au ja kuulsust.
Kõige olulisem on siidritootjale, pead olema kannatlik ja lootma, et loodus teeb oma töö.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online as well, for joining us. We wish you were here to taste this amazing cider, but maybe next time. We welcome everyone in the room now for some food and some cider tasting. Thank you.